into starting our panel discussion today. Right, so starting with Erin, right, you mentioned that you had many mentors or several mentors who are very pivotal to your career. Can you go into more details on how they helped you grow during your career and how your mentors may have evolved, right, at different stages as you grew your own career?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate to have had a few different mentors. There was one really pivotal one who was actually my original hiring manager at Workday. He brought me on, and he was much closer to my work than I think a lot of other mentors could be. But we had a really strong trusted relationship, and so he actively encouraged, and I would say like really nudged me toward opportunities I didn't think that I was suited for, and really helped increase my confidence during, I would say, one of the fastest growth periods of my career. I've also had other mentors who, aren't as close to my specific day-to-day job, but who would be really helpful when I was thinking about career transitions. They'd have a slightly different perspective, either outside my team or outside my organization. And folks like that were really helpful just to bring in a different perspective, a fresh perspective, and be a little bit less biased in, what they were recommending for me. But, those were definitely, I would say, lean on different mentors depending on what the situation is or what the particular challenge is. But I would say they all, I've been able to maintain a pretty good relationship over the years with all of them. It's not always meeting weekly. Some of them it's actually meeting weekly for some period of time. And then others it's, once a year type of check-ins.
That brings us to, how we think about mentorships, right? So clearly all of us here have been the recipient of both mentorship as well as we've mentored other people. And for this, I'd like to call upon Tatiana, who many product managers look up to you as a role model, right? You mentioned your involvement with advancing women in product. A lot of folks who do join say, hey, we joined because we saw Tatiana speak, right? Or, we saw her many blogs or publications. So how have you as a mentor paid it forward? And can you share with us one of your mentorship success stories?
Sure. So one of the things as a mentor, we will talk about mentorship versus sponsorship. I see that as a continuum, not as like two completely different categories. And so what I kind of usually do is, I'll see someone who has just a really creative, interesting perspective, right? Who maybe isn't getting heard often in an organization. And, maybe it's, because they don't speak in the same kind of tones and the same kind of Silicon Valley jargon, but they've got really great ideas, right? And that's usually the time where I will reach out to someone and start kind of posing to them other opportunities or, asking like, hey, can I give you some feedback? And so, one example of this is someone who I was actually hiring at Nextdoor for a role, and I reached out to someone that a recruiter found, and she was, I'm not going to say her name, but she is someone that I had never met before, who's in a completely different organization in a different part of the country. And her profile just looked fascinating. And after talking to her, she wasn't ready to make a move, but I've stayed in touch with her because I just think her perspective and her energy and her approach are just so interesting. And I thought in that first conversation that she was underplaying herself and her own experience a little bit. She kept saying, well, I don't think I'm qualified for this role that you're reaching out to me on. I really haven't achieved that level of, seniority that you're really looking for. And, I gave her direct feedback at the end of the conversation and said, I'm going to, if it's okay if I give you some feedback, don't undersell yourself because your experiences are far more amazing. And what you've done is far more amazing than many of the other people who think that they are very qualified for this role. So, sometimes you just keep being yourself. And what I found is if you keep being yourself and keep putting yourself out there and your ideas out there, oftentimes someone will really find value in that and will say that person is not being listened to, how can I help elevate them? So, I'm always on the lookout for brilliant people who, I can help nurture and support and just give them that extra feedback, that extra push to get them to the next level.
That's so amazing, Tatiana, that you're able to really impact so many people, right, who are on the cusp, to your point, of getting to that next level. Pivoting here a little bit, right, to the female founder lens, which I'm sure a lot of the folks in the Women in Cloud community are, right? Either they're starting something new or they're running something that they've started very recently. So Vanessa, as investment partner at NEA, one of the largest venture capital funds out there, right, in your industry, right, the trend has been that most investors are men, which is why it's awesome to have you here, right? And most startups who receive venture capital funding are also founded by men, right? So what are some things that you can, or maybe advice that you can share with the female founders in the audience that can make raising capital a smoother and more efficient process?
Yeah, well, I think the good news is that for the past few years, 2020 was a bit of an odd year. I think we can all agree on that. But before 2020, for the few years leading up to that, there were more female investors entering the ecosystem, joining big firms or starting their own funds, and more female founders were getting capital. But we're still not where we want to be, and the progress isn't fast enough. In 2020, it was flat to negative on terms of dollars going to female founders. So there's still. What I'll say is that I'm encouraged by a lot of the accelerators and incubators because they help teach founders not just how to set up a business plan, give you all great resources and connections, but they also mentor founders on how to play the fundraising game. Because there is a set process and there's these unwritten norms and rules. And, if you don't know how the game is played and you don't know, what the process really looks like internally at a venture firm, then you're at a bit of a disadvantage. I tell people it's kind of like the SATs. Yes, you can technically walk in and take it and get a great score, but if you've prepped and practiced and you know all the tips and tricks and shortcuts and what people are, what the exam's looking for and all of that, you're more likely to do much, much better. And I think that that's what mentorship and guidance from a lot of these programs can provide founders and increase their success of a great round coming together.
Certainly, and that's why Women in Cloud is such an important community for female founders, right? Not just in the U.S. but around that world, to get what Vanessa just described as prep or help, because some of that first impression, to Vanessa's point, is so key, right? To you get one shot, so you want to make the most of that. So turning over to Wayne now, right? As a vice president at AWS. What are some of the successful ways that you've seen companies or corporations do to leverage mentorship to grow their internal talent?
Yeah, mentorship and sponsorship and allyship needs to be intentional. Mentorship tends to be a bit passive. It's a conversation, it's giving advice, and that's fantastic, and it's necessary. But it's a bit of a cycle, of a virtuous cycle. Sometimes you start off mentoring people, but you want to move them along more quickly. You see great potential, and to do so, you need to go from being a passive mentor into a more active role. And this is where I see companies having an opportunity to start programs, to be very intentional about the process. And going from mentor to sponsor, if you would, has the mentor, or who is now the sponsor, spend some of their capital, some of their political capital, some of their reputational capital on the person that they are recommending, that they're sponsoring for a particular role at a seat at a table. And becoming an ally goes even further, where you're not just sponsoring the person into that role, but you are actively participating in ensuring that not only do they have a seat at the table, but they have a voice at the table, and that they're making progress in how they're viewed over a long period of time. You know, it's a little bit like taking risks in business. If you want to have big success, if you want to innovate, if you want to disrupt with value some market segment, you have to take some bets. And if you want to move great people along, you have to take some bets, and you got to be willing to take those bets. So in companies, you need programs set up that enable leaders to take those bets with promising people. And you got to be willing to take a few bumps along the way, but stick with it, because in the long run, it's absolutely worth it. And the value that's delivered is incredible.
Yeah, really great advice for all of us who work in a company environment where, you know, we can put these programs and these structures in place to create more formal mentoring relationships. So moving into more general panelist questions, and anyone can take this question as well, as I encourage active dialogue between the panelists, is what if a company doesn't offer a formal mentorship program? So how do you, recommend the audience to go about finding a mentor?
Can start. So some of maybe like do's and don'ts that I think of. So so one of the things that I think a lot of us on this panel share is that some of our best mentors have been our former bosses. And what's really great about former bosses is they know you, they know how you work, but they're no longer in a position of authority, right? So they can be much more open, much more honest. So the first place to look for a mentor is a former boss or somebody who was in a former chain of command, who you think, knows you, knows your work, and, who you think could give you really good advice. So those are the first people to reach out to. Another group of people are former colleagues, right? That have maybe risen, maybe faster than you, and you're kind of wondering what they've done. And believe it or not, there's a lot of people who are more than happy to be really open about everything. How did they think about their career? What did they do? How much are they making? What were their last 5 offers? And then they can actually turn into a sponsor, because when they get new job offers, they can pass them on to you, right? So those are the places to look. Now, a little don't reach out and cold call somebody or LinkedIn message them if you've never met them and ask them to be your mentor. It's not helpful, and it doesn't set you up for success. Even if they were to say yes, they don't know you. They never worked with you, right? So they're not probably going to give you very good advice. So that would be kind of how I would start.
Yeah, that's great advice, Tatiana. And certainly, I think, if one were to cold call, certainly do some research, because just even for me, right, reaching out to someone and actually mentioning, hey, I've seen you do XYZ recently, and I find that super awesome, and I'd love to ask you a few questions. That's a much easier way to get someone to say yes than saying, hey, can you hop on an hour-long call with me, and I'm not going to give you any context on what I'm going to ask you about. So certainly great advice to keep in mind.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that cold calling as well, because I do agree, like a random LinkedIn cold call, that's really hard to build a relationship with. But I have had a couple folks like from within Workday who maybe knew something about my own journey and had very specific message when they reached out about like a specific question that they thought, I could relate to. And so I think those are okay. It is still hard when it's nothing about that person, but at least you're both centered on maybe a shared experience that mentor can help you with.
Yeah, and I want the plus one to Tatiana's adjacency approach. You find a peer or a colleague that you respect, that there's something about them that you admire, and this links to what you said, Nancy. There's some event or some result that you want to raise to that person's awareness and say, I really did appreciate that. I really did see a lot of value in that. I'd like to talk to you about that. Start the conversation. once the conversation starts, you may find that they are more than just a colleague. They can, in fact, be a mentor. And so I think your idea and Tatiana's idea married together are fantastic ways of finding a mentor.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I worked at big companies like Microsoft and Disney that had formal mentorship programs, and I got to meet some cool people, but those mentor-mentee relationships were never as strong as the organic ones that came about. Luckily, before venture, I was in product management, and you come together with just other disciplines, the heads of engineering, heads of design, to work on a project, and then you disband again, and then create another pod. And inevitably, the head of design or head of engineering for some back-end system, we work really, really closely together, and then we just keep meeting up and keep getting lunch and organically turn into a mentor. And then, you leave the company, go to another company, and those people still, reach out, and you still maintain those relationships. And I've just found that the organic relationships of people that have experience working with me, whether as a peer or as a lateral manager or dot line manager, even former managers, I think are great, great mentors. For the cold calling one, I've honestly, like, none of the mentors I still talk to and hang out with today came from any of those like programs or cold calling.
Yeah, so certainly some differences in approaches, right? And it's certainly not a one size fits all, right? And here we have 4 seasoned, very seasoned mentors, and I call myself maybe half seasoned here. But if you guys have any questions around what's the best way to reach out to get a mentor, I'm sure all the lovely panelists would love to help you on that journey. So going into some of the success stories and really studying the impact of mentorship or mentorship versus sponsorship, can some of the panelists share, what is the difference, right? And Wayne, I'm going to kind of keep you because you already said that in your intro, right? But to the other 3 panelists, what do you think is the difference between mentorship and sponsorship? Maybe starting with Vanessa here.
Yeah. I think sponsorship is someone that's typically, what I found is, in your organization in a leadership position that can help you navigate your way upwards or through an organization. So they're your champions. They're almost like mentors, but the flip side of it is that, in my opinion, the people that I've had as sponsors, I ask for advice on certain things, not all things. And you do want to, maintain your brand is probably the wrong word, but a certain level of like perception with them. And so that's always in the back of your mind, because they're that person that's, trying to help you write your annual review or apply for a higher up position, or et cetera. Whereas a mentor, I feel like genuinely you can be open with them and tell them what's actually going on. And you have enough trust between the two of you where they can tell you where your weak spots are and how to work on them. And when they tell you where your strengths are, they know that they have actual examples and can give you a lot of tactical advice on how to keep growing in your career. So I do think those are very different things, and you go to them for different reasons, but having a mix of both, I think, is the right approach.
I'll just chime in. I don't really see that much of a difference between them, and I'll tell you why. So in my own career, there is a continuum from friend, mentor, sponsor, probably, but I don't think of those people in those terms, right? So, you talk about career moves with your friends, or your friend might pass you an opportunity, or they might, kind of spend some of their political capital to help you out. And so I think it's more about just being open to feedback and asking for feedback from your friends, from people around you, from your former bosses. And at different moments, they can be mentors, which are really just people giving you advice behind the scenes. And sometimes they will step up and see an opportunity to really help you. And in that moment, that same person who was a friend or a mentor becomes a sponsor. right? And sometimes a sponsor is, just giving you advice. So they're acting like a mentor. So I don't know. I don't really see that, like, I don't have buckets of people who are mentors versus buckets of people who are sponsors versus buckets of people who are friends. To me, it's all just a continuum. And, I'm always looking for people that I love to talk to, that I think are super smart and super interesting. And I like to mentor them, I like to sponsor them, and I like to be their friend. And whatever opportunity I can to do those things, I take them.
It sounds like quantum physics.
It's not quite quantum. Not quite quantum.
As soon as you look at them, they turn into something else.
Yeah, it's just not pattern. But you're right. It's not categorized, right? It's not as easily categorized yet.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you, Tatiana. I'm sorry to make a joke. I was trying to be too funny. It really does depend. I mean, I had somebody who was at one point, I'll be a little dramatic, but they were my arch nemesis, and they turned out to be, honestly, my best mentor ever. It took years. Like, it wasn't immediate, but there was a relationship. It wasn't apathy. It was more on the hate side than it was the love side. But it started off with at least an emotion, a connection. And that connection eventually turned into seeing eye to eye. And then from there, being tremendously honest with one another. And from there, becoming both a friend and a mentor for life. And I would be lost without that person. So I completely agree with you.
And that actually starts us off on kind of where we want to head in this conversation, which is, making our stories a little bit more personal, right? And able to connect with the audience who's here today to learn more about mentorship. So I'd love to start with Erin on this question is, can you tell us about a time when, your mentorship really aided in the success of someone who was your mentee?
Sure.
And how, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this situation, it was a former direct report of mine. So, when I led up our technology product team, there was a woman who I just felt would be an amazing leader of a pretty large part of our product, but she loved what she did as an individual contributor. She was already doing a lot of mentorship, actually, so people looked up to her as a people leader, but she was hesitant to take on that role. And so I spent a lot of time with her because she had the opportunity to take on a bigger role eventually. And I spent a lot of time with her just sharing my own experiences, my own fears that I had similarly, moving from IC to manager, and just sharing like how you find that right balance, and also how do you decide if that's something you really want to do or not. And so that was I think for her, she was her own biggest potential obstacle in taking on that next role. And so the way that I helped, I felt, was just sharing my own story, and I think just showing that it's okay not to know everything before you take on that next role. It's actually good to not know everything and have a healthy dose of fear. And so, she ended up taking that role and like moving up and like being as amazing a people leader that I thought she could be, and leading our whole security team at one point in time. And so, I'm also still working with her because she's, thinking about some additional bigger roles. It's super exciting just to see how she's gained confidence from those steps. And it's one of those things where you mentor someone and you see so much potential, and you're just hoping that, they'll probably hire you someday, right? Because if you see that level of potential that they could get to, and it's really exciting to see.
And I would just double down on that point, which is the best relationships for me as a mentor are people that I can honestly say, I want to work for you in the future. And just kind of, there's one person who also was a direct report of mine. And she and I talk, I don't know, a couple of times a month. And I tell her all the time, my goal is to work for you someday. And I think that is the best relationship that's possible.
I think that's really supportive of Tatiana, what you said earlier, in this people move through various stages of relationships, and it's a constantly moving definition. You know, Erin, you just articulated my entire strategy for my career in one sentence. So good job.
Awesome. And really thank you, Erin, for sharing that personal story, as well as, Tatiana and Wayne, about how you really view your mentors, right? And, the way that life goes, right? You never know. Some people accelerate, some people get through their, I call inflection points, right? And sooner or later, we may report to our former direct reports, and that's awesome, right? If you have that prior relationship. So going to the last section of my plan questions, and I see certainly a lot of questions that the audience has already posted, so I want to make sure we get to those as well, is to answer the question that I have gotten quite often, and I'm sure all of you have gotten quite often over the past year, which is, how do we find mentors during COVID, right? So there's no more in-person networking events, and I know personally, having led Advancing Women Product through this evolution of doing digital only webinars, right? There's no more let's mingle, right? Let's grab a drink afterwards and talk about what we really liked about the talk, but also use that time to get to know one another better. So as mentors, and this is, we'll start with Vanessa for this question, how has COVID impacted your mentoring activities this year?
I do think it's hard to meet someone for the first time virtually. So I'd say to form a deep relationship virtually is difficult. I think we were all really open and receptive to doing Zoom happy hours and Zoom dinners and all of that towards the beginning of the pandemic. Now very limited, even my friends from home that have been friends since I was in kindergarten, someone's like, oh, let's, I'll catch up on Zoom on Sunday. And it's just like, oh, like another hour in front of Zoom. It sounds so painful. I love you guys. I'm sure I'll see you soon when we all get the vaccine. But I do think it has made just everything harder across the board. And I'm a parent of a toddler, and not having childcare also just heavily constrains how much free time I have to be able to do things outside of my work responsibilities. So COVID, yes, it has impacted it, and we see it across the board, across all the numbers. But if we continue to be in this world for longer, we're going to have to figure out how to do it, because it is an important cause, and these relationships are very valuable in the long term. And so, I think if we're in this for longer, we'll have to just figure something out that's better than what we have right now.
And I think on this panel, right, there's a lot of moms who are, mom is their full-time job, and they have another full-time job, which is their job, right? And we've heard so many, reports on CNBC and CBS News and everywhere, right, that COVID has taken a ton of women out of the workforce, right? Or, and you have to only imagine, right, that it has, and it will impede this next generation of rising leaders. So what is one way that you all then are giving back during this time to help mitigate some of that impact? Maybe start with Erin.
I was just going to say it's a super hard question. I was thinking about this last night because I also have 2 toddlers at home, and I'm pregnant with a 3rd, and so it's like crazy in our house. And I honestly, I don't realistically think there's a lot that we can do until we're a little bit further past the hump of the pandemic, and like that people can get childcare, because like Vanessa said, we've sort of figured out a routine within our house, which is why you're not seeing like kids running behind me. But before that, it was literally like, keep the kids alive, keep my job. Like that was like the bar that I was trying to reach every day. And so things like networking or like meeting with mentors or anything that was even somewhat extracurricular is just off the table, right? And I think the moms who are hit hard are faced by that. It's like me trying to go and mentor someone who's like, 0% capacity and just dealing with so much on the home front is just feels unrealistic. And I think it's going to be, you know, everyone stepping up to help mentor and sponsor programs to get moms back in the workforce after the pandemic. That's my honest opinion.
Yeah, I would just plus one what both of them said. Also a mom with 2 kids, and I think we just need to be understanding to each other, right? And kind of keep in the back of our minds that if somebody doesn't respond or somebody, can't show up, that there's probably a lot going on in their life right now. It's hopefully we'll get out of this by summer, and then hopefully life will return back to normal. But until then, I think we all just need to be really kind and understanding to each other.
Yeah, I think coming from this from a slightly different perspective, I am not a mom, and thank you all for being moms. The relationships that we do have, that we had pre-COVID, making a concerted effort to make sure they don't wither, because people are busy. And it's easy for those relationships, like any relationship, to fade away when folks are preoccupied with other things. What I've done is made sure that my calendar is fully open. So if somebody says the only time I have is Sunday morning, I don't say, well, that's not during work hours. Like, sure, Sunday morning, like, let's do it. So I widen the week by making sure my calendar can accommodate the calendars of those that are way more busy, with a lot more activity on the home front, or maybe with parents that are older and it's hard to manage them now because we can't get to them, right? So I think if you are a mentor, you are a sponsor, just being super thoughtful and making your time available so that things continue until we all get that shot in our arm and can go back to doing what we do.
Yeah, those were certainly very, poignant thoughts, right? That I think was a great sort of wrap up to the planned questions that I had. And I'm seeing the list of, questions from the Q&A section grow by the minute here. So I'll skip over the first question that's about mentors and from this session, because we'll cover that in just a few moments here. The first question is, as a mentee, I try to take control of my learning and ask the questions and not try to burden the mentor too much. But sometimes I don't know what I don't know or need to know to ask. How does mentoring work?
So it can work in lots of different ways is the short answer. But I think, again, remember, you're trying to figure out where you are from my mental model on that spectrum from friend to mentor to sponsor, right? And sometimes with sponsors, it's a little bit more kind of like, I need something and I'm going to reach out to you to ask if you can help me with something. Think about that as like when you're getting a job and you need like a reference, right? Those are the people that you reach out to, right, for a reference, and they understand and they kind of are, kind of in it with you and will be supporters of you. On the friend to mentor spectrum, it works in lots of different ways. Again, there are some people that I talk to, a couple times a month, and it's usually like, how are you doing? Let's take a walk, checking in. And then the conversation kind of meanders. With those relationships, it's unusual for them to have specific questions, although sometimes they do. But it's really it's more of a coaching, I would say, relationship, like a friendly coaching relationship. And just kind of, the more open you can be with that person to share your vulnerability and to share the kinds of things that you're thinking about and the kinds of things that you're struggling with at work, the better that relationship could be. And with some people, they literally have worked with me in the past, and they say, hey, I'm struggling with something at work. Can I ask you, can I just set up a time to talk to you and ask you some questions? And then they will come in with a specific use case or a specific thing that they're struggling with or specific questions. But that's the only time that you really need to have specific questions. Otherwise, just it's like an open conversation with somebody that you know, that you trust, and who has really kind of said, hey, I really like you, so let's if I can be useful to you, let's talk.
It's great input, Tatiana. Anyone else like to add anything? So the next question, looks like Wayne did. Okay, Wayne, go ahead. I was going to actually direct the next question to Vanessa here, because it came in from someone in the audience who is an EIC. And so previously I've heard EIC being identified as executive individual contributor. If that's wrong, please yell at me over Q&A here. So I don't find myself having a lot of connections with whom I can organically start a mentoring relationship. How do you recommend finding mentors in such a case?
Maybe I'm not familiar with what the work looks like for an EIC, but look, I don't think mentors necessarily need to be, and we touched on this earlier, people that are more senior to you or have more experience than you. I think they can be colleagues. I think I've gotten a lot out of the relationships I've had where I've mentored someone, and my mentee gives me feedback on things as well. And so what I would say is, I don't know exactly the profile you're looking for a mentor, but I would maybe increase the aperture there. And then if there really is, if you just work in a complete vacuum and you don't talk to anybody ever, then I would join some professional organizations where you can meet other people that have similar interests or in industry similar to yours, and strike up a relationship with someone at another company or in another place. And I think there's, Women in Cloud's a great place to start. And I'm sure you can find other organizations where there's like-minded folks. But, I would try to find some common ground with someone and ways in which you can both help each other and strike up a conversation in that way.
Additive to what Vanessa said, finding a kindred spirit is often a function of just paying attention and listening. I was in a debrief for a loop recently, and there was another executive who was part of that loop. And this is an executive who's incredibly quiet normally. Like, I've been in many meetings with this person, and I never hear them speaking loudly. And the advice they gave within this debrief was fantastic. It was it made me want to go to this person and say, can I have a conversation with you? So to Tatiana's point, it doesn't have to be intentional, or it doesn't have to be directed. It's just you found the kindred spirit, and it's worth having that conversation. It may turn into something. It may turn into a friendship, but it may turn into something more than that. So I think very additive to Vanessa's point about just look around. I bet you they're there. You just haven't found them yet.
And I would add one more thing on top of that. And I've given this advice to individual contributors who are also looking for a promotion, which is there are usually cross-functional projects that companies are looking for people to sort of volunteer to do somewhat on the side. And some of those projects can be great ways, especially if in your actual role you don't get a lot of exposure to other groups. That can be a great way to, build more connections, get to know more people within your company. For example, we had one where there was a group called the Honey Badgers to fix our Jira instance because we had totally over customized it, and we were just looking for people from different teams to join. So things like that, you can build a rapport with a new set of people that's slightly outside of your current role. And then what Vanessa said on the professional organizations, I think if you can find particularly an active role or a project volunteer for something, that's always better than, I think, just joining and going to a networking event.
So we've heard from all the panelists on different advice or venues or areas where you can seek mentors? And certainly for whoever asked this question, I'd love to actually hear back in a month's time or 2 months' time around how that went and which avenues turned out to be most successful for you. We have time for one more question, and the question's going to be, right, how do you keep a connection with a mentor going? It's certainly one that I've asked myself a lot, right? Because, my personal strategy is to go deep rather than wide, because unless you have time to keep up with, 50 plus people, I don't, right? It's usually good to really build some true relationships with a select few folks. But how do you do that? So love to turn it over to Wayne this time to share some tips with us.
So I'd go back to what we said earlier in the dialogue, specifically what Tatiana introduced in terms of this, set of relationships you have with people. We tend to have a handful of best friends. We tend not to have 20 or 30 best friends. It's somehow that it's cognitive dissonance to think you could have 30 best friends. But let's assume we have 2, 3, 5, and we go to those folks often and have conversation. I would recommend doing the same thing with mentors. Have your 2, your 3, your 5 folks that you want to go to, and make a concerted effort to have coffee. Make a concerted effort to have conversation. It's manageable, and start off with 2. 2 is a good number.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that it's like a friendship, right? Like the same question is like, how do you keep a friendship going? Well, you reach out to the person, you ask how they're doing, you tell them what's going on with you, you ask for advice, right? Like it's just like a friendship. Only there's this extra layer where you're usually talking about your career and the other person is invested in helping, right, with that career conversation. So it's exactly like a friendship. It's the same way that you would stay connected with your friends. It's the same way that you would, kind of text people, or, when you find an interesting article, share it with them. So yeah, think of your mentors as, friends, and friends, a friendship that is focused around really helping your career.
And Erin, would you like to close us off on this topic and also the panel itself?
Yeah. I mean, I would just add on to that. It is like maintaining your friendships. And I also think that it's one of those where if you've invested a lot early on, it doesn't mean that you need to like text or meet for coffee like once a month. You can go through periods where maybe it's been a while, but like as soon as you re-engage, like that connection is still really strong and still there. So I do think that they each require some period of time where you're, more frequently engaging and like building up that connection. But I think once you've built it up, you don't have to feel like, oh, it's been a month, like let me text this person and make sure they still remember who I am.
Got it. Thank you, Erin. And certainly for, folks here, right? A lot of what we talked about today was on organic and authentic mentorship, right? Treat it like a relationship like anything else, right? It shouldn't feel forced. It should feel natural because in the course of time, you mentoring that person or you being mentored, right? You're going to form a relationship. I mean, that's how human beings are built. So that said, I'd love to thank all the panelists for their time today. In fact, I was just checking Twitter and LinkedIn, and tons of folks have already posted and upvoted this conversation today. And also wanted to say, Vanessa unfortunately had to leave right away. So we'll just leave it at she's on the board of Robinhood. And so if you guys have seen what's happening with stock trading these days, you can interpret what that means. So thank you so much, Tatiana, Wayne, Erin, and also Vanessa. I will pass her all of your regards. So thank you all. Virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
At this point in the agenda, I'd like to turn it to Wayne, who just popped off of camera, to come up again and give the sponsor remarks. Hi.
How was my timing? Listen, this was a great panel, Nancy, and I want to thank all of the folks that were behind putting this on today. We had some technical difficulties, and I think that resulted in a much more, frankly, organic conversation than what we were planning to have with some prepared slides and so on, in addition to the questions. So, Nancy, good job. Thank you. We talked about a few things today on the panel, and the one thought I want to leave you with for today is that the notion of mentorship and sponsorship and allyship, Tatiana said it, very well. It's a shifting relationship. It's one where it may start off somewhere and it likely will end somewhere else and then come back to the original point. Don't be afraid to engage your colleagues and your superiors, or even folks more junior than you in your organization. Find that kindred spirit. Find people who you respect, that you find interesting, and begin the dialogue. You may find that you become the mentor as part of that exercise, and you may find that you become the mentee, or you just may find that you made a new friend. But if you start the dialogue, you're not afraid to do so, and you're persistent through that, it will benefit you one way or the other as a person and likely as a professional. So I strongly recommend that you do so, and I'm grateful for the opportunity today to talk to you guys about this. This is something I'm super passionate about. Making sure that I, as a leader, find and grow the next level of leaders to make sure that people have a voice and have a place at the table is at least half of what I do as a vice president at AWS. And I look forward to having another opportunity in the future to talk to you guys about this and other interesting topics. So thank you, Nancy.
Olivia, can you go to the next slide? Okay, that's fine. I will be slide support. Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Olivia. Olivia, do you want to maybe go back a few slides here? Yeah. Thank you. Wayne? One second here. There you go. You didn't think we let you off without talking about our pace of innovation.
Okay, so we'll go through the slides. Just for logistics, who is running the slides? Do I have the ability to do that, or is that being run in the background?
Is the gracious slide?
Okay, let me start off, and we'll figure out how the whole slide thing is going to work in a minute. So one of the things that we were going to talk about earlier today, before the panel session, was a little bit about the pace of innovation at Amazon, and specifically, I'm going to speak about the pace of innovation at AWS. And I wanted to actually show how, in ways that dovetails with the topic that we had today. So Amazon is a technology company. We use technology to innovate on behalf of our customers and to deliver them disruptive value. And one thing that, if you know anything about AWS and Amazon on whole, the pace of innovation is incredibly quick. In many ways, for a company that has been around for 25 years plus, you would expect that the pace of innovation would fit more of a logarithmic curve, flattening to some extent after a long period of time. But instead, what you see on the screen is really more of an exponential curve. The pace of innovation is actually increasing and not decreasing. And the way this happens is, by and large, due to our culture, and also the way we organize. Now, AWS specifically is organized as a set of autonomous businesses. And each of those businesses focuses diligently on our customer and delivering innovative results. And each of those businesses has a dedicated leader, what we often refer to as a single-threaded owner. And their purpose is to fulfill their services objectives on behalf of their customers and deliver those customers the best possible experience that they can for what they do. So if you would, our culture of customer obsession and innovative thinking and autonomous ownership really does result in a flywheel effect. And what you see with this curve is really the flywheel effect of our ability as owners on behalf of our customers to drive innovation at an exponential pace. Now, in addition to that, customer obsession is our start. But two things that we really think about is, first, long-term thinking. We don't think about the next quarter ever. We always think about the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and more. And a culture like that affords you the ability to take risk and to think for the long term. It also affords you to make mistakes, to have failures, right? To be willing to pursue a business, to pursue an idea that may take years for anyone to really believe that it was the right thing to do. If any of you know anything about Amazon, for years, people have questioned a lot of the businesses that we've gotten into, saying, why are they doing that? And then in the long run, people would come around and say, I now get it. But usually that takes 6 or 10 or more years. An example of that is AWS. When Amazon got into the business of compute infrastructure on demand, people would say, why is a bookseller in the IT business? Why would anybody want to buy compute infrastructure from somebody who runs a retail site? Well, here we are now. It's like 16 years later. And I don't think there's a lot of question on, was it a good idea? Was it the right thing to do? And did it deliver value, disruptive value, to a large set of customers? And is this something that has value for a long period of time? I think the answer is yes. And I want to tie this back to the slide we had up at the very end. Oh, thank you. Our culture of innovation dovetails really well with one of my passions, which is developing leaders by being a mentor, by being a sponsor, and by being an ally. And this, if you would, this virtuous cycle is something that I'm lucky enough to participate in. I consider myself a very lucky leader. And I define luck here as being opportunity and preparation intersecting with one another. And when they do intersect, you have the opportunity to grab that luck. And as a mentor or a sponsor or an ally, I consider myself often lucky to be in the role to fulfill those particular functions or roles with people. Because what happens is that my path and their path intersect. An opportunity has intersected with somebody being prepared. And in doing so, I have the opportunity to work with them, to either mentor them, to sponsor them, or to go all in as an ally, finding them a place at the table, finding them a voice in the room, and supporting that as they make their way forward in what they want to do in their career. So I'm very passionate about this subject. I believe that, again, my role, half of my time really needs to be on finding, growing, and ensuring the success of future leaders. And this ties back to the culture by doing so is a long bet. It's not a quarter-to-quarter exercise. It's something that you invest in. It's something that you invest your personal time and energy in for years, and 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, more years. So, and you're also willing to know that sometimes you're going to fail. And when you do, it shouldn't discourage you, but it should be a lesson learned, and then you understand why it didn't go well as you apply those lessons to other people that you're sponsoring, mentoring, or being an ally for. So this is why I'm passionate and grateful about having this time to spend with you today, to have this conversation. And I look forward to doing it again. Thanks. Nancy?
Thank you, Wayne, for sponsorship remarks, and really appreciate you giving all of your input today and perspectives on mentorship. So folks, if you have questions on how mentorship in big companies work, like Amazon or others, I think Wayne would be a fantastic resource. And so thank you for joining us today, Wayne, and really thank you for being a male ally.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks a lot, Nancy.
Cool. And next up, we also have remarks from Ying Zhao from ServiceNow. So Ying, as you join us, would love to hear an intro about what you do, what functions you lead at ServiceNow, and also your own words on mentorship and your participation in the Women in Cloud Summit today.
Thank you, Nancy. I really learned a lot from the previous panel discussion. Hello, everyone. I'm Ying Zhao, Director for Cloud Supply Chain Management at ServiceNow. I'm a part of ServiceNow Global Cloud Services team. As a supply chain team, we work with engineers together to ensure our data center readiness for space, bandwidth, hardware, and software to host ServiceNow's customer instance. Next slide, please. ServiceNow believes in the power of technology to create better ways to get work done. Our purpose is make the world of work better for people. As you may know, we are powered by workflow building a single platform. There are 4 main areas: IT workflow, employee workflow, customer workflow, and creator workflow. Whatever your business is facing, we can workflow it. This is my second year of attending Women in Cloud conference. I feel so honored to be the sponsor here, and I'm looking forward to participate one of tomorrow's mentor sessions. As a supply chain professional who manage the cloud procurement, I'm most familiar with our vendor diversity program. Supplier diversity and women lead vendors are always an important part of our global impact strategy to create equitable opportunity. In my 8 years at ServiceNow, I built trusted partnership with many vendors. But among all the vendors, there is one vendor that really dear and near to my heart, is a women lead vendor. We have went through many challenges and new tasks all together. We trust each other for the capability of handle the business well. I also care the vendor, the partner that I'm working with, this incredible woman who share her joy of buying a new house and then move to the next phase of their life. And I also was inspired by her attitude and capability of handle some really difficult life challenges that she was facing. And I share this story because I want to mention that we want to see more women-led vendors in our supply chain ecosystem. And my past experience tells me that some women-led vendors could be really great partners for us. Another thing that I want to share here is COVID has created many changes and challenges to all of us. When I look back how my company is doing, one of the things really stood out is our hiring. We had more than 3,300 new employees joining us digitally and remotely since COVID started, which is about a quarter of our company's workforce as of today. HR onboarding, ramp up, training to bring them to the same productivity level. I feel that our company did a great job. So in my team, we actually had 1/4 of the team joining remote as well. This include contractor and include interns who received the returning offer for this upcoming summer. So I have never seen them face to face, but I rarely feel the difference. Kind of never think of that. They are just part of my team. Also, we have new hires. Like I just landed 3 new offers last week, who will join us remotely as well. So as a hiring person, that I feel that during this challenging time, I could possibly share some useful experience for the people looking for advice of landing a job in this new world. So I'm just hoping that the mentor sessions I can give back to the community. The session, the previous mentor session mentioned that during COVID, finding a mentorship is really hard. But for me personally, I think of mentorship more often than before because of we are being siloed, because of we don't know, have the opportunity to find answers quickly. So I was kind of always having this in mind. And I just feel that this is awesome opportunity for me, and then continue build the network and contribute to the community. Thank you very much.